Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mishnapad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. And Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jai Mudiriyet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 31st day of January 2022 in San Diego, a reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Dasa Swami Prabhupada. And we're beginning a new chapter, chapter 13 of the 5th canto, which is entitled, the canto is entitled Creative Impetus, and the chapter is entitled Further Talks Between King Rahugana and Jadabharata. So we will begin by reading the chapter summary. The Brahmin Jadabharata became very kind to King Rahugana, and to disassociate him from the material world, he spoke figuratively of the forest of the material world. He explained that this material world is like a great forest in which one becomes entangled due to association with material life. In this forest there are plunderers, the six senses, as well as carnivorous animals like jackals, wolves, and lions, wife, children, and other relatives, who are always anxious to suck the blood from the head of the family. The forest plunderers and the carnivorous blood-sucking animals combine to exploit the energy of a man within this material world. In this forest there is also a black hole covered by grass into which one may fall. Coming into the forest and being captivated by so many material attractions, one identifies himself with this material world, society, friendship, love, and family. Having lost the path and not knowing where to go, being harassed by animals and birds, one is also victimized by many desires. Thus one works very hard within the forest and wanders here and there. He becomes captivated by temporary happiness and becomes aggrieved by so-called distress. Actually, one simply suffers in the forest from so-called happiness and distress. Sometimes he is attacked by a snake, deep sleep, and due to the snake bite, he loses consciousness and becomes puzzled and bewildered about discharging his duties. Sometimes he is attracted by women other than his wife, and thus he thinks he enjoys extramarital love with another woman. He is attacked by various diseases, by lamentation, and by summer and winter. Thus one within the forest of the material world suffers the pains of material existence. Expecting to become happy, the living entity changes his position from one place to another, but actually a materialistic person within the material world is never happy. Being constantly engaged in materialistic activities, he is always disturbed. He forgets that one day he has to die. Although he suffers severely, being illusioned by the material energy, he still hankers after material happiness. In this way, he completely forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By hearing this from Jadabharata, Maharaj Rahugana revived his Krishna consciousness and thus benefited from Jadabharata's association. He could understand that his illusion was over, and he begged pardon from Jadabharata for his misbehavior. All this was told to Maharaj Parikshit by Shukadeva Goswami. And now we'll read the first verse. Brahmana hovacha dadatyaye advani ajaya niveshito rajas tamaha sattva vibhakta karmadrik saesha sarto artaparaha padibhraman bhavatavim yati nasharma vindati. Brahmana hovacha dulatye dvanyajaya niveshito rajastamak sattva vibhakta karmadrik sa esha sartor taparak paribhramam bhavatavim yati nasharma vindati. Brahmana hovacha dadatye dvanyajaya niveshito rajastamak sattva vibhakta karmadrik sahesha sarto taparak paribhraman bhavatavim yati nasharma vindati. Brahmana hovacha dadatye dvanyajaya niveshito Vajastamak sattva vibhakta karma drik. Sa esha sarto tapadak paribhraman. Bhavata vimyati na sharma vindati. Brahmana vacha. Tudatya dvan nijayani veshito. Vajastamak sattva vibhakta karma drik. Sayesha sarto taparak paribhraman. Bhavata vimyati na sharma vindati. Brahmana vacha. Brahmana vacha. Tadatyaye dvanyajaya nibeshito. Tamat sattva vibhakta karma drik. Sahesha sarto taparak paribhraman. Bhavata vimyati na sharma vindati. Zoomland. Brahmana vacha.
Durataya divani ajaya niveshita.
Tudatyaye dvanyajaya niveshito.
Rajastama sattva vibhakto karmadi.
Rajastamak sattva vibhakta karma drik.
Swayesha sartha paro paribhraman.
Sahesha sarto taparak paribhraman.
Bhavata bhim yatina sarma bindati.
Bhavata vimyati na sharma vindati. Brahmana vacha. The Brahman Jadabharata continued to speak. Dadatyaye, which is very difficult to traverse. Advani, on the path of fruitive activities, performing actions in this life, creating a body in the next life by those actions, and in this way, continuously accepting birth and death. Ajaya, by Maya, the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Niveshita, cause to enter. Rajatama, Sattva Vibhakta, Karmadrik, a conditioned soul who sees only immediately beneficial fruitive activities and their results, which are divided into three groups by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Saha, he, eshaha, this, sa'artaha, the living entity falsely seeking sense gratification. Artaparaha, intent upon gaining wealth. Paribhraman, wandering all over. Bhava atavim, the forest known as Bhava, which means the repetition of birth and death. Yati, enters. Na, not. Sharma, happiness. Vindati, obtains. Translation. Jadabharata, who had fully realized Brahman, continued, "My dear King Rahugana, the living entity wanders on the path of the material world, which is very difficult for him to traverse, and he accepts repeated birth and death. Being captivated by the material world under the influence of the three modes of material nature, Sattva-guna, Rajaguna, and Tamoguna, The living entity can see only the three fruits of activities under the spell of material nature. These fruits are auspicious, inauspicious, and mixed. He thus becomes attached to religion, economic development, sense gratification, and the monistic theory of liberation, merging with the Supreme. He works very hard day and night, exactly like a merchant who enters a forest to acquire some articles to sell later for profit. However, he cannot really achieve happiness within this material world. Purport. One can very easily understand how difficult and insurmountable the path of sense gratification is. Not knowing what the path of sense gratification is, one becomes implicated in the repetition of birth and accepts different types of bodies again and again. Thus one suffers in material existence. In this life, one may think that he is very happy being an American, Indian, Englishman, or German, but in the next life, one has to accept another body among 8,400,000 species. The next body has to be immediately accepted according to karma. One will be forced to accept a certain type of body, and protesting will not help. That is the stringent law of nature. Due to the living entity's ignorance of his eternal blissful life, he becomes attracted to material activities under the spell of Maya. In this world, he can never experience happiness, yet he works very hard to do so. This is called Maya. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So as I was preparing for the class, I was also reviewing the last verse, which is the last verse of the previous chapter. And I noticed that there's two words that are repeated, and they're very significant to show us this continuity here, and the contrast that Jadabharat is giving between the path back to Godhead, if you recall the last verse, and the path into the forest of enjoyment. And those two words are Advani, which Prabhupada has here in the present verses, on the path of fruit of activities, and Yati. Yati means enters. So if you recall the last verse, Tasman naro sangasu sanga jata jnana sine naiva vivrikna moha hading tadiha katana shutabhyam labda smatir yatati padam. So those two words, Yati and Advani, are both there. In the previous verse, they're at the very end. So Yati means to enter, and Advani means this path. So these two verses provide this perfect contrast of the two paths that are open to the living entity in human form of life. In animal life, you have no choice. You're completely controlled. But human beings, because of our higher intelligence, did I say Om Jnana? I didn't. I did. Okay. He says I did. I'm going to take it. You're as spaced out as I am. So, here are the two paths, and that we can enter upon. Now, that entering upon means that we make a decision, and but the problem is that in ignorance we don't even know that there is a decision to make. We're automatically on the path. And so the key in human life is coming in touch with someone who is already realized, who can give us these choices, can tell us what our real choice as human beings is. Otherwise, we're basically leading animal life. That famous verse, Dharma huiteshamadiko dharma nahina pasabhisamana, that we share with the animals. After all, we have a whole history of coming through so many species of animals, and those tendencies are still there. Eating, sleeping, mating, and fearing. And fearing includes defending. So those are still with us. And if our human life is simply centered on those four things, however polished they may be, Prabhupada says you may be sleeping in the 50th floor on a very nice skyscraper building and eating a fancy food in a restaurant, but you're still basically sleeping and eating. It's just like the dog on the street is, struggling to find something to eat and lay down somewhere in a corner somewhere. So it's important to realize that, to not be illusioned by the glitter of what we can do in human life, like this artificial civilization. I was reading the other day how just all these gas stoves that we have and the gas heating, it's very dangerous. There's so much leakage right in your home of methane. What to speak of the cost for the environment, which is methane is much more of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. So all those millions and millions of gas heaters are themselves damaging. But it's part of the arrangement for convenience in material life. And this is the problem. We make all these conveniences at great effort. We exploit the environment and exploit other human beings, and what to speak of the animals. And we forget about the cost. Not just the cost of the environment ultimately, but the cost to our own karmic record. So many sins, so much cruelty is being engaged in. And people don't realize this is all part of their karmic record. They do for even more suffering. So this is the value of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is giving us, Srila Prabhupada with great effort translated this. And we find, let's just review the previous verse, which I found such an encouraging verse. That tasma naro sangha susanga jata. So the sangha there, the first one is asanga. Asanga susanga. This is a central principle. It's a code phrase, really, for what is so essential to progress in devotional service. You have to be willing to give up bad association, because association is everything. What did we learn? By meditating on the objects of the senses. And if you don't know any different, you're going to do that, just growing up. This is what material life is all about. You'll be absorbed in the object of the senses, and you will desire to enjoy them. Or on the other side, you'll be desiring to escape the dangers, but you'll be absorbed in that way. So that kind of sangha means you become attached to things that are sangas teshu bhajayate. Sangha means attachment and association. And we know that matures, if you will, allows me to use that word, develops into strong attachment known as kama. And what do we learn from the third chapter? This kama is the eternal, all-devouring enemy of the living entity. Our material desires. And kama is nothing but prema that's been curdled, if you will, by a contact with the modes of nature. So we know how strong that prema is. That's the most powerful force. I just finished reading the Anta Lila, finished the CC, I'm going to start again soon. And that powerful force of love of Godhead is moving Lord Chaitanya through all these extraordinary activities, and all the gopis, they leave their houses, they can't even dress properly, they run out. That when prema is in its pure state, it's a tremendously powerful force. So how powerful is kama, which is nothing but a reflection of that prema? The whole world is moving on it, material desire. So that's the danger of bad association, meaning that you're simply letting your senses run riot and try to enjoy this material world. So therefore, the first word is asanga. In our tasma naro asanga susanga. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, both things have to be there. To be willing to give up bad association and to control the senses, and to direct the energy and get good association from devotees. And that was completely unavailable in America, in the West, until Prabhupada heroically came west, and we know it started the whole movement. So asanga susanga. Now what develops from that good association? This is also mentioned by Kapila Dev in his famous verse, Satam prasangan mama virya samvido, bhavanti ritkana rasayana katha. You will hear genuine katha from devotees, pure devotees, if you're fortunate, which is just like life-giving elixir. And ultimately, that increases your faith in Krishna in the process of devotional service, shraddha ratiya bhakti, your attraction, and ultimately your devotion. So sangha is everything. So here he's saying, in the last verse of the previous chapter, that you develop this sort of knowledge, real knowledge of the self and God and this world and all the thing I was talking about last night. That can serve as a weapon to cut through the illusion. Because when your mind is purified, your intelligence is strengthened, then you can resist the allurements of Maya and run to Krishna. In other words, you can't just resist and repress, But you can decide, no, let me chant Hare Krishna, not let me go to the temple, not go here, let me associate here. And before long, by Krishna's grace, you lose your taste for that, and you see it in its true perspective. And this chapter that we're entering on now is it's almost like pulling the curtain away from what the reality is, this forest of, quote, enjoyment, right? It's a very forest of enjoyment. The enjoyment is there, but it's just a lure of Maya, and it's basically a tremendous suffering. And some of the description here is pretty shocking. You know, he described a materialistic household life, how the wife is like a jackal, you know, just sucking your blood, you know, taking your wealth, and the children are all, you know, nipping at your heels, you know. It's quite a sobering description we're going to do. But that's what we need. We need someone to pull away the you know, rose-colored glasses, you know, to see through the world and try to romanticize it. It's not. It's really a place of punishment. But we have the means of deliverance at our hands. The process of devotional service centered on the chanting of the holy name, which is so appropriate for this time. So back to the verse of the day. So now this path, Advani, that's the other word. Advani is the path. Is very difficult to traverse. In other words, if you just to be in the material world, when you think about it, we live in a society built up. You know, it's artificial. But you know, millions and millions of people are living day to day in tremendous difficulties and straits. Just to put enough food on the table, just to get some safety. There's so much danger. I know wars going on everywhere. In Africa, there's constant wars. I forget what's going on. And even in India now, you know, it's because of the pandemic, it's really kind of, one of the things is that a lot of the children who were learning, you know, poor children were in school, and they were able to, you know, with hope of getting out of the poverty thing, would get some education. That's been destroyed, a lot of it, because of the lockdowns. And many of these kids, they have no facility for electronic connection or anything. And so they're not doing anything. They go to work, you know, at age, you know, the thing. It's such a difficult situation. And so that's what the material world is. It's you know, bad, worse, and horrible. You know, that's really it. Dukali mashashvatam. So you have to take a, you know, genuine look at it and see what it's like. Now, people don't want to do that because all I know is this world, and so they want to try to eke out some pleasure here. But when you see that there's a whole other world, and even in this world, if you practice devotional service, you can tolerate, you can come to the point of equipoise, and develop your Krishna consciousness. And yes, there is pleasure to be had. Kirtans, serving the deity, chanting Hare Krishna, and all of these different things bring a pleasure. It's not a question of a monetary or material facility. Even with the least facility, if there's some material facility, you build a temple, and of course print books. Books are so essential. Prabhupada, you know, his spiritual master famously told him that. So we're given the path. We're given the choice, rather, of the two paths. This is what Prabhupada came to give. You don't have to simply struggle hard for getting enough to eat, eke out some pleasure, have some sex pleasure, and then get old and die miserably. That's not what life is all about. There is this other path that you can enter on, exactly what he's talking, yati, enter on. And if you follow it nicely, following the orders of the spiritual master and the Shastra, and you're serious, then you can enjoy, even in this lifetime, and at the end, go to the spiritual world, back home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada was saying that from the very first days. He was giving that promise and that hope, you know, and enough people took it, you know, seriously to become purified and start the movement and so forth. So this is a very memorable chapter. I remember, you know, I lived through the publication of the different cantos. When I came, we were working on the third canto. All we had was 2.5 cantos. And I remember I was working on the battle of Hiranyaksha and Lord Varaha. You know, I was proofreading that chapter. Wow, this is amazing, you know. And then, oh my God, the teachings of Kapila Dev came in the 4th volume. You may remember those, you know. That was super enlightening. You know, I was talking last night about how the 10 different aspects of philosophy, 10 root dashamula, Bhaktivinoda Thakur gleaned from these teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami. So, how this world develops, the interaction of the different elements with the false ego and all of these different things, is just fascinating, and it's satisfying to the intellect. It's not satisfying that God created it in 7 days, 6 days, whatever it was. In 7 days he rested, sorry. Yes, like he has to rest, That's, for those steeped in the modern science, that doesn't work. But this other explanation, it made more sense. It was very satisfying. And that's what you get from the Bhagavatam and all the books that flow from it, is that it's intellectually satisfying and challenging. It certainly challenges so much of our preconceptions. But it also gives you the process by which you can realize this. And so it's a complete program that's given its. So this is, we're just now entering on this now. And right at the first verse, he's giving the introduction here about what's in store for this description now. And of course, and at the end of the introduction that I read, it says, and that King Rahugana thus became realized. In other words, we need to have a sobering description and understanding of just what's in store if we don't practice Krishna consciousness, if we don't make the effort. There's that word effort. The yati, this word yati means to move on the path, and yati is maybe relative, is one who strives. We have to strive because we've been so conditioned over many, 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 many lifetimes that if we don't strive, we're going to be just drawn back into the habitual, what Prabhupada calls conditioned life. So therefore, it's imperative that we strive without wasting time, because if you waste time, it's easy to fall again under the spell of Maya, that there's some way to enjoy, some way to negotiate, and you can be happy here. There is no way. But that spell is very strong. Prabhupada would always quote that verse from the 11th canto, Labdva sudurlabam vidam bahu sambhavante manushyamata nityamapi adhira turnam yateta napateta namrityayavad nikshe saya vishayakara sarvatakshat. It's kind of the verse that echoes these two contrasting verses that I just pointed out, the last verse of the previous chapter and this verse. So what he's saying there, first of all human beings, he's addressing all human beings. You have attained this rare human form of life. Labdva sudurlabam, very difficult to obtain, rare, relative to all the other organisms in the world. Bahusambhavante, after many, many years and many, many births, now you have the human form. Manusham artadam, you can hear it. And what is the unique quality? Artadam, that only in the human life can it give you the real goal of the soul, the svarta, sva-arta. There's so many, arta can mean money, it can mean anything valuable. But what's really valuable is your waking up and your Krishna consciousness. So, but like other forms, like all forms, it's temporary. Svartadam anityam. And so one has to be dhira. Very important word. It comes right in the beginning of Krishna's teachings to Arjuna. One has to be dhira and learn to tolerate the dualities of this world. Otherwise, there's no way out. There's no way to get liberation. So, dhira means sober-minded, thoughtful, and self-controlled. So then what's the solution? Third line, he says, what do you do with this knowledge? Turnam yateta. Immediately strive. Immediately strive. As long as the body is still, you have your senses about you, you haven't died yet. Turnam yateta napate, it hasn't fallen down. Anumrityu. Anumrityu means death is always following you at any time. It's always that threat. The body is such a delicate, fragile machine, And of course, the common way of thinking, yeah, I'll get old and die. But you may not get old and die. You may just die. You may just become completely invalid. It's a tragic thing. I was reading this on Canada. It gets so cold now. Some Indian fellow took his wife and his kid, 2 kids, I think, for a walk. He never came back. He froze to death out there. It's horrible, And so this is the material world. Anytime this ocean, I mean, they just had a huge volcanic explosion in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't over here, it was over there, so okay, it was over Tago. It could easily be right off the coast here. What'll happen here? You know, this is, we're walking on, you know, it's not secure. Therefore, every moment, chant Hare Krishna. So that's what he's saying. Turnam yateta, immediately strive for what? Nikshayasa, the ultimate good. Not this little maya sukhaya, the flickering, illusory happiness of sense gratification. The happiness which is the worst enemy of the living entity. That little happiness keeps him going for more and more and more, and he becomes trapped. So I said, no, nikshayasa, which Arjuna asked for. What is that ultimate good? Liberation from this bondage of birth and death and return back to Godhead, where there is unending happiness, Satchidananda. No misery, only unending happiness. You know, it says, oh, that's just a pipe dream. No, it's not. It's not a pipe dream. This is what the great acharyas tell us. And they're not ready to spin dreams about it. They've experienced it. And then he ends this verse, Vishayakala Sarvata, because after all, in all these other forms I talked about, you've experienced all varieties of sense gratification. Here's where the chewing the chewed comes in. You know, how many times are we going to try the same sex life and eating this, eating that, and whatever else you can imagine? It's just the worst kind of illusion, and it keeps you bound here. So this is graphically explained throughout the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam gives us what we need to hear, not necessarily what we want to hear. We need to hear these sober descriptions of what material life is, so that we become a little distasteful. You know, we could say, yes, this is a great illusion that I've been living, and let me see the truth. And the wonderful thing about this age, of course, this age, we learned at the beginning, is not very favorable for yoga, right? Does anyone know the verse? You can chant along, Vijay. Prayana payashak sabhya kalabasmin yugejana manda samanda matayo manda bhagya yupadvitaha. So, for the most part, the following things pertain. You don't live very long. You are lazy in the matter of spiritual life. I mean, the book distributors and other preachers, they go out heroically and we're looking for some souls who are receptive. But I would say the majority probably are, they ignore you or they refuse you, But of course, you find a few that are receptive, and it's wonderful. Buy books. But let's face it, there's over 7 billion people on this planet. And there's a small minority of devotees, certainly serious devotees. But that doesn't matter. The point is that majority or minority, this is the truth. And the enterprise that Lord Chaitanya has given us and the process that he's given us is practical for this age. They're lazy in the matter of spiritual life, and if they seek for it, chances are they'll get cheated. There's so many places, come here, we'll go and, learn this, we'll give you this mantra, like that. And they're all exploiting. So therefore, they're unfortunate, mandabhagya. And the other thing is always disturbed. The mind is so disturbed that you can't pay attention. So it's difficult. So we need special benediction. And therefore we have this easy process of chanting Hare Krishna. And so therefore this age is worshipped by those in the know. Kaling sabhajyantya guna gyas sara bhaginaha. It said those are real Aryans and understand the essence. Why? Because yatra sankirtana naiva sarva svarta bilabhya. There's that word svarta again. Just by sankirtan, one can attain all one's real goals, the goal of the soul. One can become detached from matter and become attached to Krishna and loving Krishna. So we have to take all the processes seriously and maintain our consciousness such that we can really benefit from the process. There are so many sub-active, don't eat, nectar of instruction. What are the things that destroy the bhakti? Over-collecting, overeating, aspiring for material things. Laziness, not following being lazy in the matter of the rules and regulations. That's niyamagraha. Or just going through the motions. You're there, but your mind is elsewhere, and you're not really, you can't keep that up for very long. So we need to study that. That book is really important, that Nectar of Instruction, very practical for devotees, how we can stay on the path and progress toward the final goal. So this is, the part of the Bhagavatam, and so much of it is in prose, right? There's a whole section we just read in prose. There'll be more, but it's necessary to have also these really sober descriptions of what material life is, so we can become determined to escape from it. Okay, I'll read the verse one more time. Jadbard, who had fully realized Brahman, continued, "My dear King Rahugana, the living entity wanders on the path of the material world, which is very difficult for him to traverse, and he accepts repeated birth and death. Being captivated by the material world under the influence of the three modes of material nature, the living entity can see only the three fruits of activities under the spell of material nature. These fruits are auspicious, is all materially auspicious, inauspicious, and mixed. He thus becomes attached to religion, economic development, sense gratification, and the monistic theory of liberation. He works hard, very hard, day and night, exactly like a merchant who enters the forest to acquire some articles to sell later for profit. However, he can't really achieve happiness within this material world." Okay, any discussion on these points?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Prabhu.
May I?
Yes, please.
Yes. From the translation, I get that the path of the material world is very difficult to traverse. So based on this, my question is, and you have been asking cogent, concise questions. So here it goes. Very difficult in what way?
How is it difficult to traverse the material path?
Yes, in what measure, in what way?
Well, did you come to Krishna consciousness, or were you born in Krishna consciousness?
No, I came to Krishna
All right.
consciousness.
Well, don't you remember? There's so much getting a job, keeping a job, falling in love, and then having him or her, fall out of love. And it's just difficulty at every step. Here in San Diego, just to pay the rent, people, have to work a couple of jobs, and always the anxiety going to raise the rent. And then there's Dukali and Mashashvatam. There's all kinds of miseries, and unexpected. I never expected to, I don't know if I told you this. I got my serious sprain, which is now 3 months old, and it's still giving me a little trouble. It's mostly healed up. But I went to the place where I sprained it, because it was in the dark and everything. So I said, and the only place on that road where I could have got the sprain is right there where it happened. And I immediately said, "Oh, this is some coming from Krishna, that I would step off the road at that point again." But the idea is that there's all kinds of difficulties, and even if you're not now suffering from a difficulty, your friend is, your mother is, you're old, and so therefore you're filled with fear that it may happen to you. That itself is a misery. So the idea is that at every step there's either the actual misery or the threat of misery, and of course there's the big misery of old age, disease, and death facing everyone. Well, maybe not old age. You could always die prematurely. That's your choice. But the point is that when you analyze it, really, it's a place of misery, and especially when you get some inkling of what reality is, what the spiritual world is. There's no old age and disease and death there, and there's no birth. So when you see the contrast, you understand what a bad deal this is. And therefore, you should come to the conclusion, let me not aspire to try to get some so-called success in this material world, which is just fool's gold. It looks like gold, but it's not really gold. So that's the point, is that it's very difficult to traverse the path. But if that's all you know, okay, well, let's traverse it. That's all there is. But it's not all there is. That's the first message. No, there's another world. Let me, if you allow me, because it's not that late, one little poem I wrote. And this is, you have to visualize. Almost everyone has seen this picture or one like it. Krishna's sitting beautifully in the forest on a seat of flowers, or whatever. And there's a little dove on his hand, and there's a little deer in front of him, a little cow, and one other animal, which we'll learn about. And so it's a very blissful scene. He's emanating all this love, and they're loving him, and like that. idyllic scene. So the sweetness of Sri Krishna's form beguiles. Still sweeter is his face like autumn moon, but sweeter than the sweetest is his smile, whose luscious beauty makes the gopis swoon. Govinda's beauty captivates the doves, the swan, the deer, the cows, and every tree. Indeed, in Braja, every creature loves Sri Krishna and is drowned in ecstasy. That all-enchanting land is paradise, our home where we may dwell eternally. Most welcome there are those who pay the price to learn to love Sri Krishna perfectly. Now that's just one little meditation. But that's actually the reality. We have to believe it. And why not believe it? Because even in this world, we can experience a taste of that. You can feel, yeah, there's so many things going on, but I'm not involved. I've stopped striving for all that stuff, and so my mind is on Krishna. There's the kirtan, there's the beauty of the service, the devotees, pilgrimage, all of these things. And one can experience a taste of that, the sweetness of the holy name. Have you ever wondered about that? So many descriptions of the holy name. Maduram madarebhyopi mangalebhyopi mangalam. It's the sweetest of the sweet. And what is it? Madhura madhura meta mangalam. So we're chanting the holy name, but we're not tasting it as like sweet as that glubjan we had last night. You know, that was really... But the point is that that's the reality. And if we practice carefully, we can develop the taste. We can develop the appreciation of that, of everything about Krishna, beginning with the holy name. So the point is that this material world is a bad deal. He compares it here to this merchant, right, going out. It's a bad deal from the beginning. Go out in the forest, try to make your way here. Oh, maybe I'll be like Elon Musk. I'll have billions of dollars. Oh, wait, let me try. That's just Maya. You know, he's not happy. You know, he's worrying that Bezos is going to get to Mars first. It's crazy. You know, this is nuts. It's obscene. It's a great offense. Imagine what we could do with one or two of those billions. With this thing of 30 billion, 40 billion, whatever it is. It's horrible. But that creates an illusion that, oh, you know, I can also do that, or at least half of that, maybe. So that's what the difficulty is. It's very difficult to traverse this path, material path. Whereas the spiritual path, there are also some difficulties, but ultimately is susukam kartam abhiham. Our old friend Daniel, I remember how he liked that verse so much when he was in ecstatic chanting. I told him, just keep dancing, but if he would have done that, he'd still be here. So susukam kartam, it's happily performed. You know, I mean, come on, you're chanting and dancing, taking prasadam, right? Prabhupada said this is a recreation system only, right? So this is the contrast that we have, and that's the answer to your question. It is very difficult, and we can see the difficulty at every step. Anyone else?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Vinita. Give him the mic. Yeah, we need to have the mic because we have an audience out there.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. One thing that I've been sensing from my reading of the Bhagavatam is that a lot of sections deal with the misery of the material world, the problems that it has. But part of our Krishna consciousness is not just anartha nivritti, it's also artha pravritti, where we focus on the Lord, on His holy names, on His pastimes. So I was wondering that at the Vaidhi sadhana level, how much emphasis should be given to this idea of, okay, this is a miserable place, this place of duality, this is the kalyama shashvatam, as compared to, you know, focusing on the pastimes of the Lord, you know, hearing about the glories of the Lord.
Yeah.
There seems to be like some devotees who say, if you keep focusing on the Leela, then naturally all the bad qualities that we have will naturally get purified. On the other hand, there are those who say that, you know, you should know the problems with this material world, then only you will feel
it's not, yeah, it's not, you know, okay, now, you know, at this point, all we're going to do is focus on the problem because we need that. It's both. When I joined the ISKCON movement, as I mentioned, we had a small, we had a minimum, the third canto. I was starting at third canto Bhagavatam. But there's still plenty of description in the first canto, second canto, we didn't lack for that. But the point is that every night we read Krishna book, and there was the Bhagavad Gita class, and the Nectar Devotion was there also with that, and there was the Krishna book, and there was kirtan. There was a lot more kirtan, just objectively speaking. Devotees would go out. When I came, the standard was 3 hours a day. You would go out, and that was the tail end of it. I mean, they used to go out until 12 o'clock at night. That was basically the Hare Krishna movement, because there weren't hardly any books. And it was just, and the devotees were very blissful. So the point is that both have to be there. When we're chanting our rounds and tasting the nectar of the holy name, that's certainly the positive side, right? I mean, that's being attracted to Krishna. And of course, we have to fight with the mind, so we hear nicely. The deities, and the festivals coming up, those are all attracting us. But we shouldn't neglect to read a Krishna book and drink in the nectar of Krishna's pastimes and discuss them, learn verses about them, for sure. Because that gives us the contrast. Not that we're just, I'll tell you a story. When I came, I would sit for class in the Bhagavad Gita. I wasn't living in the temple, but I would come frequently. And every class it was like, this body, it's just a bag of blood and stool and pus and, I want to hear about Krishna Lila, So I was kind of in that mood. But luckily they had a play. It was New York, so of course some people, Broadway was there. So we had a drama group, and Sunday night they would put on Krishna Lila, and I would go up there and listen to that, and it was great, I mean, it was all great, but I wasn't ready for the heavy duty classes. So the thing is, we should have a balanced diet. We should read and we should hear and we should know, these things, and as a warning, and it's reality, material reality is reflection of the real reality. But we should definitely be ready to, and regularly read these nectar pastimes. Prabhupada gave that to us. I remember my favorite section of this Krishna book when I first joined it was the chapter 21 with I think it was chapter 21 with the Venu Gita, where Krishna is walking into the forest and the gopis are singing him. So I started memorizing it. No Sanskrit, just English. That's all we had. And so I was serving out prasadam, and as I was serving, I was reciting these, the beginning of this chapter. Krishna was very pleased with the atmosphere of the forest, and the devotees were shocked. What is this? Where'd you get this? It's right from the Krishna book. So memorization is important. You can memorize sections and verses, and it opens up. Of course, there are so many verses preaching, heavy duty, like that, Labdva Sudurlabham, there's many like those. But there are also these beautiful verses, just the first canto, just the first canto. You have the prayers of Kunti, the prayers of Bhishma Dev, Chibavanna Kamanang, Tamadavanang, Lavagata Golavarambadan, Dadani, Vapadavavatana, Namjam, Vijayasake, Tadastumena Vadya. He's meditating on Krishna. He's standing over him. He's just preached for hours or days to Yudhishthira, and getting him fixed, and so he'll take up the service, right? Yudhishthira was devastated by all the blood and all of the death. Not only human beings, but all those elephants, thousands and thousands, and the horses, And he said, I'm responsible. He was disconsolate. So he comes to, and Bhishma Dev is there on the, the bed of arrows, and he speaks to him, I think, in the Mahabharata for days. And sets him right. And then the time comes, the auspicious time to leave. Krishna's watching him, And Chibavanna Kamana, he's the most attractive in all the three worlds. Tamanavanam, that darkish color like a tamalachi. And his garments are shining like the sun. Ravikata gold of Arambadang, and his beautiful lotus face surrounded by those locks of hair. He's the friend of Arjun, Vijayasake. Vijay, by the way, means Arjun, the victor. Ratamasture, let my love be attracted to him without being diverted to anyone else. So we should learn how to relish those things, and of course the holy name. And in this way we'll see the balance. Here's the reality, all attractive, beautiful, enlivening, And here's this miserable reflection of it that's luring us. But when we see through the trick now, so no thank you. That's the whole purpose of this.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hari Bol. Dhanavari?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, go
Very
ahead.
nice.
Go ahead.
I like this Itimati Rupi Kalpita Vitrushna. I like the Bhishma Stuti very much. My father used to recite when I was young. So, very nice. My question is, when you mentioned, Prabhu, that human, we came here because we did something wrong, and that's why we came here. But on the other side, we read and you mentioned that human life is so precious, and we just got this human life, but at the same time, so it's both are a little contradictory. How do we understand that even though we did something, we are here, but then again, human life is very precious. We have one lifetime chance. We came from bottom to up, so we have to appreciate, even though we are in material world and there is so much misery and everything.
Yeah.
So how do we balance? Thank you.
Well, the thing is, of course, we made a mistake, fatal mistake, the original sin, as it were, turning our back on Krishna and wanting to try to exploit this material world, each one of us. But the thing is, we forget everything. We have no idea why we're here, what the purpose is, but what obvious is that in order to live, we have to gather, things, and there's some pleasures here. So we become completely bewildered. Life after life, who knows how many days, lifetimes of Brahma we've been doing this. So how to get out? We always have to remember that Krishna wants us back there. He's with us now. He stays with us the whole time as the super soul and tries to enlighten us, but we're so dull that we can't hear him. So he comes outside as the spiritual master and as the Shastra, and so we still don't want to hear it, and so, foolish. But if we're fortunate, we do become interested, and we see the contrast and what our real mission is. So only in human life can you understand that. These lower forms are like just different kinds of cells in the big prison house. And in the human life, we have the opportunity to hear and understand properly. In the other cells, it's like solitary confinement, it's like impossible. You just have to suffer till you die, and you come up until you come to the human. That was what the verse was about. So, it's very difficult. We don't want to stay here. The point is we should want to get out. Now, we don't want liberation for liberation's sake. We know that we want to go back to Godhead and play with Krishna. But in our present state, it's an important motivation to stay on the path. That's why Krishna says, Janma Mrityu Jara Vadi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam. That one of the aspects of knowledge to keep you going in the right direction is the evils of birth, old age, disease, and death. Sorry, Vijay. The evils. The stresses. I'll talk to you about that later. I looked up the word evil. Anyway, so
we shouldn't lament about human life, right? That we are here. Thank you, Prabhu. That we shouldn't constantly that we are here. We made a mistake, but we should take advantage of, because we got human form of life.
Even in the prison house, there's a way of getting out if you with good behavior. So good behavior is practicing Krishna consciousness. It's because the idea the jailer is not out to make us suffer. Krishna is out to reform us. The suffering is there to teach us, and the best way to learn is to hear about it. Do we want to go through again so many births? We can hear about it. We've already been through it so much, and I say, okay, this is not for me. Why should I stay here? And that's the value of the human form. Is the higher intelligence. That's why it's precious. So
thank you so much.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
All glories to the Prabhupada. Thank you very much.
Krishna Prabhu.